What if I told you there's a man who never died? Not in myth, not in metaphor, but in ancient prophecy. A man who walked with God and vanished. His name was Enoch, the seventh from Adam, a prophet unlike any other. And while the rest of humanity returned to dust, Enoch was taken, alive, into a realm beyond death, beyond time. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Genesis 5:24. But what does that really mean? The Western Church turned the page, the textbooks forgot. But high in the mountains of Ethiopia, monks still whisper his name. By candlelight, beneath stone-carved monasteries, they still read his book, 1 Enoch, a scripture the rest of the world buried. In Ethiopia, Enoch was never lost because they believe he was never gone. They believe Enoch is still alive, not dead, not resting, but waiting, watching, preparing for a return the world isn't ready for. And in the pages of their ancient prophecies, he's not just a prophet. He is the scribe of heaven, the guardian of judgment, the one who holds the secrets of time itself. And if the prophecies are true, then Enoch's return will mark the beginning of the end. So don't blink, because what we're about to reveal has been hidden for over 1,000 years. It was erased by emperors, forgotten by theologians, but never lost to those who kept the flame burning in the sacred highlands of Africa. And what's more shocking is that the calendar we follow, the timeline we trust, might be completely wrong. So stay with us until the end, because in the final section of this video, we'll uncover what only Ethiopia preserved, Enoch's true mission, and the moment he's prophesied to return. Comment below, I believe Enoch still walks. Like if you believe some truths were never meant to die. Subscribe to help us bring these buried voices back into the light.
Imagine this, a village funeral, dust in the air, mourners weeping, and one grave empty, because the man it was dug for, he never died. His name was Enoch, and his story, if you've only heard it from the pulpit or in passing, is far stranger than you've been told. The book of Genesis says something that almost slips by if you're not looking closely. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Genesis 5:24. That's it. One sentence. No explanation. No tomb. No final words. No death. Every other man in his lineage, Adam, Seth, Enosh, Methuselah, they lived, they died, and the Bible tells us exactly how long they breathed. But not Enoch. He was the 7th generation from Adam, a righteous man, a prophet, and then he was gone. Now, some might chalk it up to poetic language, but if it's just poetry, why does the book of Hebrews double down on the mystery? By faith, Enoch was taken away so that he did not see death and was not found because God had taken him. Hebrews 11:5. Let that settle in. He did not see death. He didn't even leave behind a body to bury. In the ancient world, this wasn't just unusual, it was unthinkable. Death was inevitable. Even kings died, even prophets, even saints. But Enoch, he walked with God and then walked out of history. In modern terms, it's as if a man simply stepped out of time. One minute he's there, the next, nothing. No remains, no relic, just a silence that echoes louder than any grave. And that silence? It's been filled with questions for thousands of years. Where did he go? Why was he taken? And what was so important that God would pluck a man from earth and keep him alive? Ethiopian tradition doesn't believe this was an escape. It was an assignment. In their sacred texts, Enoch isn't just gone, he's active, preserved, watching, documenting, waiting. His story doesn't end with absence. It begins with ascension. Because according to their version of events, Enoch wasn't taken to avoid death. He was taken to confront something bigger than death itself. And that raises a haunting possibility. If Enoch never died, is he still alive today? And if so, what exactly is he waiting for?
Picture this. A monk in white robes sits cross-legged beneath the shadow of an ancient stone church carved straight into the mountain. The wind is dry, the air is thin, and in his lap lies a manuscript, worn, stitched in goatskin, written in a language almost no one else on earth can read, Ge'ez. And in that manuscript is Enoch, not metaphor, not a myth, but a living memory. While the Western world erased his name, Ethiopia remembered. They remembered not because they had to, but because they chose to. Because for them, Enoch isn't just history, he's part of a living, breathing faith, a story that never ended. You see, when the Council of Nicaea met in the 4th century to finalize the Christian Bible, they discarded the Book of Enoch. Too strange, too revealing, too uncomfortable. The Roman Church labeled it heretical. Europe forgot it even existed. But Ethiopia? They kept it, quietly, faithfully, generation after generation. They didn't just preserve the Book of Enoch, they honored it. They read it during night vigils. They painted it into murals. They passed it from elder to apprentice, priest to child. In the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, one Enoch was never apocrypha. It was sacred scripture. The books others buried, Ethiopia remembered. Even when the world mocked them, even when the West called it folklore, they held on. And perhaps the most astonishing part is the only complete version of the Book of Enoch in the world, written in Ge'ez, survived not in Rome or Jerusalem or Oxford, but in Ethiopia's highland monasteries, untouched by crusades or colonization. It wasn't until a Scottish explorer named James Bruce traveled to Ethiopia in the 1700s that the West rediscovered it. He didn't find it in a tomb. He found it being read, alive, in community. And when he brought it back to Europe, many scholars couldn't believe what they saw. Here was a book quoted by early church fathers, Tertullian, Clement of Alexandria, Origen, and yet completely unknown to modern Christianity. A book that may have influenced the Gospel of Matthew, and even the book of Jude, which seems to quote Enoch directly. So the question becomes, why was it removed? Why did one half of the Christian world bury it, while the other half enshrined it? And more importantly, what truths were too dangerous to let survive?
Imagine this. A man, not just taken into heaven, but changed by it. Not an angel, not a ghost, something in between. A divine scribe, tasked not with fighting evil, but with remembering it. That's the Enoch you never learned about. Because in most modern churches, the story stops with his disappearance. He walked with God. He vanished. That's it. But in the ancient Ethiopian texts and in the mystical traditions of Judaism and early Christianity, Enoch's journey continues, and his transformation is unlike anything else in Scripture. He doesn't just ascend. He becomes Metatron, the one who sits beside the throne, the voice behind the veil, the pen in the hand of God. Now, Metatron may sound unfamiliar to most people, but in the Kabbalah, in Jewish mystical writings like 3 Enoch, Metatron is described as the Prince of the Presence, the highest of the high, the one who records every word, every deed,
every moment of human history into the heavenly archives. He is not worshipped, but he is feared, because memory, after all, is the sharpest form of judgment. And here's what makes it even more mysterious. The ancient sages believed that only one human being had ever become Metatron: Enoch. This is Enoch, who pleased God and was taken up, and his name was called Metatron, chapter 4 of 3 Enoch. Think about that for a moment. A man so righteous, so pure, so faithful, he was not only spared from death, he was elevated into a cosmic role of recording, witnessing, and guarding divine truth. In this role, he sees the movement of stars. He understands the calendar of heaven. He knows the fates of nations, the rise and fall of empires. And unlike angels, who were created to serve, Metatron remembers what it's like to be human. That's why he's the perfect intermediary. Not because he's perfect, but because he knows what it means to choose righteousness in a broken world. And while the Western world tucked him into Apocrypha, Ethiopia honored him openly, in their scrolls, in their liturgy, in the whispers passed from monk to monk. To them, Enoch didn't become some abstract symbol. He became the living link between heaven and earth. So what does that mean for us? If there is a being at the right hand of God who was once flesh and blood like you and me, who remembers sorrow, betrayal, injustice, then maybe justice is more personal than we thought. Maybe the final judgment isn't written in cold law, but in lived experience. And maybe, just maybe, that scribe is still writing. Which raises the next question. What is Enoch recording right now? In the next part, we'll explore where Enoch may be, not as a figure of the past, but a watcher in the present, living in a realm few dare to imagine.
Imagine a place the world forgot. Not a ruin, not a city, but a realm. A realm not marked on any map. A place where time doesn't move forward, but folds inward like a scroll waiting to be opened. Now imagine someone's still there, watching, waiting, remembering. That's what Ethiopian prophecy tells us about Enoch. He didn't just vanish. He didn't retire into the stars or melt into mythology. He was placed, intentionally, in a hidden realm. A divine waiting room, a chamber beyond time. In Ethiopian tradition, this realm is not heaven as we imagine it. Clouds, trumpets, wings. No, it's something deeper, older. A realm behind the veil, spoken of in hushed tones by monks and mystics alike. Some compare it to the hidden Zion, the invisible city of God, to Agartha or Shambhala, legendary sanctuaries said to be protected from corruption and decay. But these are not physical places in the way we think of geography. They are spiritual thresholds, layers of existence, hidden in plain sight. And Enoch? He is not trapped there. He is stationed there, assigned. There is a realm between judgment and mercy. That's where Enoch waits. Ethiopian oral tradition. According to the Book of the Mysteries of Heaven and Earth, preserved in Ge'ez and passed down through Ethiopian monasteries, Enoch stands as a sentinel in this realm, observing both the rise of evil and the cries of the righteous. He is the gatekeeper, not of heaven itself, but of the timing of its return. In this space beyond space, he watches the unfolding of prophecy, recording the signs, preparing for the appointed hour. And what's more mysterious is that he's not alone. these ancient texts hint that he may be accompanied by others, beings also preserved for the final confrontation. Elijah, Melchizedek, perhaps others we've forgotten entirely. What if these aren't just stories, but echoes of a spiritual resistance waiting to be activated? And while the world races forward, distracted by headlines and hashtags, there's a realm untouched where Enoch still walks, his eyes set not on the past, but on the final unveiling of what's to come. Because Ethiopia's memory isn't just poetic, it's prophetic. And prophecy doesn't just speak, it waits, patiently, silently, until the veil is lifted. So we must ask, if Enoch is watching, what is he waiting to see? In the next section, we'll explore what happens when he returns, why Enoch and Elijah, two men who never tasted death, must re-enter history to face the enemy no one expects.
What if the end of the world isn't coming until two men return? Not kings, not warriors, but witnesses, living proof that not every prophecy has passed and not every man has died. Their names? Enoch and Elijah. Two men, both taken by God, both lifted from earth without facing death, both still alive somewhere beyond the veil. But why? Why preserve them if not for something more? Ethiopian tradition, along with early Jewish and Christian thought, points to a profound reason. It is appointed for man to die once, and after that comes judgment. Hebrews 9:27. In other words, death is not optional. It's not just biological, it's spiritual law. So if Enoch and Elijah never died, their story can't be over. It must still be unfolding. And according to ancient prophecies, especially those preserved in Ethiopia, they are destined to return in the final days, not to rule, not to preach, but to witness. The book of Revelation speaks of two mysterious figures, the two witnesses, who appear during the time of tribulation. They prophesy for 1,260 days. They perform miracles, and they are eventually killed, only to rise again 3 days later. Most theologians debate who these figures might be. But in Ethiopia, there is no debate. They believe it will be Enoch and Elijah, because they are the only two in Scripture who were taken alive. And to fulfill the law of mortality, they must return, live among us once more, and finally face death. But their death is not defeat. It is the trigger, the spark that signals the countdown to the final reckoning. And here's where it gets even more powerful. These aren't just holy men. They are record keepers. Enoch, the scribe of heaven who documents the deeds of the righteous and the wicked. Elijah, the prophet of fire, who called down heaven itself to challenge kings and false gods. Together, they are the last witnesses. Not because they saw the beginning, but because they will testify at the end. Their role is not about destruction, it's about remembrance, about truth standing in human form, uncompromised, uncorruptible. And in a world blurred by lies, revision, and spiritual confusion, their return will be the ultimate act of clarity. So if we believe they're coming back, what should we be doing now? Are we living lives worth remembering? Would we be found faithful in the scroll Enoch writes? In the final part of this journey, we'll explore the calendar of heaven, the sacred time that Enoch revealed, and the reason Ethiopia counts the years differently from the rest of the world. Because what if time itself is part of the prophecy? What if we've been counting time wrong? Not just a few years off, but an entire cosmic rhythm, missed, ignored, erased. Imagine waking up to realize that the world's clock, every calendar, every holiday, every sacred cycle was built on a system that replaced the original. Now, what if the man who knew the real calendar was Enoch? In the book of Enoch, preserved for centuries in the mountains of Ethiopia, there's a section rarely discussed in modern churches. It's called the Book of the Luminaries. And it's not just a poetic reflection on stars. It's a heavenly timetable. Enoch is shown the movements of the sun, the moon, and the stars, each aligned with divine order. He's given the true number of days in a year, 364. He's shown how the seasons were meant to flow, how time was designed to echo righteousness, not chaos. The year is completed in 364 days, and the lights of heaven move exactly as they were commanded. 1 Enoch, chapter 72. But somewhere in history, we lost that rhythm. Rome introduced the Julian calendar, then came the Gregorian reform, and the world began marching to the beat of kings, popes, and empires. But Ethiopia? They kept counting differently. To this day, they follow a calendar that's 7 to 8 years behind the Gregorian one. And their liturgical cycle? It still reflects Enoch's vision, sacred fasts, holy feasts, readings from apocryphal books, alignment with the stars. It's not just tradition, it's resistance, a refusal to let time be colonized. Because time is not neutral. In prophecy, time is a weapon, a message, a warning. And if the enemy can control your clock, he can control your memory, your future, even your faith. And maybe that's why Enoch was shown the calendar of heaven, not just to mark days, but to preserve divine alignment. And if Ethiopia's time is the one that still echoes heaven's rhythm, then maybe it's not behind, maybe it's ahead. Because sometimes the ones who seem out of step with the world are the only ones still walking in tune with God. So now we have to ask, what year is it really? And more importantly, what time is it in prophecy?
So now we return to the question we began with. What if one man never died? What if he still walks beyond the veil, beyond the reach of history, beyond the grip of time? What if Enoch isn't just a prophet of the past, but the keeper of a future we're not ready for? While the world forgot him, Ethiopia remembered. While empires buried his book, monks lit candles to keep his name alive. They didn't just preserve a manuscript, they preserved a rhythm, a warning, a hope. Because Enoch isn't just the man who walked with God. He is the memory of what we lost and the mirror of what we could become again. He represents a righteousness that wasn't defeated, only hidden. A truth that wasn't silenced, only postponed. A return that wasn't canceled, only delayed. And now, as the world spins faster, louder, more divided, perhaps the one who walks outside of time is watching, still writing, still waiting. Waiting for the hour when the watchers rise again, when the witnesses speak, when the calendar resets to heaven's rhythm. Maybe that's why Ethiopia never let him go, because they knew the story wasn't over. And if the flame of Enoch still burns in the highlands of Africa, then maybe it's time the rest of the world looked east, not for conquest, but for memory, for prophecy, for truth. Because not all prophets die, not all wisdom fades, and not all truths can be buried. Somewhere, just beyond what we see, Enoch still walks.